Please. The word broke from her lips like a dying prayer. Your Grace, I'm begging you. Don't send me away. Alexander Thorne, Duke of Ashford, stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid as iron. The rain hammered against the windows of Ashford Manor, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one tearing through Eleanor Grey's chest. The carriage is waiting, he said, each word carved from ice. You will leave tonight. She pressed a hand to her stomach, a gesture she didn't yet understand. If you would only listen. I have heard enough lies. His voice cut through the air like a blade. You will take what I've given you and disappear from my life, permanently. Eleanor felt her knees weaken, but she refused to fall. Not here, not in front of him, not when he looked at her with such nothing. As if the past 6 months, every whispered word, every stolen moment, every promise made in darkness had never existed at all. What the Duke didn't know, what she herself would not discover until 3 weeks later in a cold roadside inn, was that as she walked through those doors into the storm, she carried with her the one thing he would spend the next 4 years desperately searching for, his heir. If you treasure stories of broken hearts and second chances, of love lost and love reclaimed, subscribe to Noble Hearts. Your support helps us bring these tales of passion and redemption to audiences around the world. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? England, 1848. Eleanor Grey had learned early that in the world of the nobility, women like her existed in the margins, visible only when needed, invisible when inconvenient. Born to a gentleman of modest means, she had been raised with just enough education to make her useful and just enough poverty to make her desperate. When her father died, leaving debts that swallowed everything, Eleanor had 2 choices: accept a position as companion to the Dowager Duchess of Ashford or face ruin. She chose survival. Ashford Manor rose from the Yorkshire moors like something from a Gothic novel, all grey stone and brooding towers, wrapped perpetually in mist. The Dowager Duchess, Lady Constance Thorne, ruled it with the iron precision of a general commanding an army. Everything had its place. Everyone had their purpose. And Eleanor's purpose was clear: be present, be useful, and above all, be invisible. For the first 3 months, she succeeded admirably. The Duke of Ashford rarely visited his ancestral home. At 29, Alexander Thorne preferred London Parliament, his clubs, the endless social machinery that consumed the lives of men of his station. When duty called him to Yorkshire, he arrived like a winter storm, cold, brief, devastating to the peace of the household. Eleanor learned to avoid him. She kept to the shadows during his visits, performing her duties to the Dowager with quiet efficiency, never drawing attention, never speaking unless spoken to, until the night she couldn't avoid him. She had gone to the library to fetch a book for the Dowager. The room should have been empty. It was past midnight, and the Duke had been in London for weeks. But when she opened the door, she found him there. Alexander stood before the fire, still in his riding clothes, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked different, younger, somehow, with his dark hair dishevelled and his cravat loosened. The perfect facade of the Duke had cracked, just slightly, and through that crack she glimpsed something raw: grief. "Forgive me, Your Grace." She moved to retreat. "I didn't know." "Stay." The word stopped her. Not a command, exactly. Almost. A plea. He turned, and for the first time, truly looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. His eyes were storm grey, shadowed with something she couldn't name. "You're my mother's companion." "Yes, Your Grace." "Eleanor Grey." "How long have you been here, Miss Grey?" 3 months. "Your Grace." 3 months. He gave a bitter laugh. "And I never noticed you once." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "Do you know what today is?" he asked. "No, Your Grace." "The anniversary of my wife's death." He took a long drink. 3 years. "The world expects me to have moved on by now, to have remarried, secured the succession, done my duty." His jaw tightened. "They don't understand that some losses—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Eleanor should have left then, should have murmured condolences and disappeared back into the shadows where she belonged. Instead, she heard herself say, "Grief doesn't follow a schedule, Your Grace. It doesn't care what the world expects." He looked at her again, this time with something like surprise. "You speak from experience." I lost my father 2 years ago. People told me to be grateful his suffering was over, to focus on practical matters, to move forward. She met his eyes, as if love could be scheduled and filed away like a ledger book. Silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unexpected understanding. "What book were you looking for?" he asked finally. She told him. He found it for her, his fingers brushing hers as he handed it over. The touch lasted only a second, but she felt it like a brand. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Alexander." She blinked. "Your Grace?" "When we're alone." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "You may call me Alexander." It was improper, impossible, dangerous. "Alexander," she whispered, and watched something shift behind his eyes. That was how it began. Neither of them planned it. Neither of them wanted the complication. But over the next 3 months, the library became their refuge, a space outside the rigid hierarchy that governed every other part of their lives. He would find excuses to stay at Ashford Manor. She would find excuses to be in the library late at night. They talked about everything: books, politics, grief, hope. He told her about his late wife, Catherine, a marriage arranged by their families, built on duty rather than love. How he'd tried to be a good husband, but never quite learned how. How she'd died in childbirth along with their daughter, and he'd been left with nothing but guilt and an empty title. Eleanor told him about her father, about the slow decay of their small estate, about learning to make herself useful because she had nothing else to offer the world. "You're more than useful," Alexander said one night, his voice fierce. "You're brilliant. You're kind. You see things others miss." "I'm your mother's paid companion," she replied, but without bitterness. "That's all I'll ever be. What if you could be more?" The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. "Your Grace." "Alexander, Alexander." She stood, putting distance between them. "We both know what I could be. Your mistress, perhaps, hidden away in some cottage while you marry a woman worthy of your title. Is that what you're offering?" His face darkened. "You think so little of me?" "I think you're a duke." Her voice was steady despite her pounding heart. "And I'm a woman with no fortune, no connections, no power. I know how these stories end. What if this story could end differently?" She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But she'd seen too much of the world to indulge in fairy tales. "Good night, Your Grace." She left before he could see her cry. But Alexander Thorne was not a man who gave up easily. Over the next month, he courted her with a quiet, determined intensity that broke down every wall she'd built. Small gifts left in the library, books she'd mentioned wanting to read, a new shawl when he noticed her old one was threadbare, notes in his own hand, not dictated to a secretary personal, revealing, raw. And then, one night, in late autumn, everything changed. She was walking in the garden, the only place she could go to escape the suffocating watchfulness of Lady Constance when he found her. "Eleanor." She turned. Alexander stood on the path behind her, still in his riding clothes, as if he'd just arrived and come straight to find her. "Your Grace, I didn't know you'd returned. I came back early." He moved closer. "I couldn't stay away." Her breath caught. "You shouldn't say such things." "Why not if they're true?" "Because truth doesn't change reality. You're the Duke of Ashford. I'm the woman I love." The words fell into the twilight like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything. "Don't." She stepped back. "Please don't say that. It's too late." He closed the distance between them. "I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it was impossible, improper, insane. But I can't fight it anymore, Eleanor. I love you. Your mother will never accept it. Society will never accept it. Then they'll have to adjust." His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "Marry me." She couldn't breathe. "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more in my life. Marry me, Eleanor. Not as my mistress, not as some secret arrangement as my wife. My Duchess. It would be a scandal. Let them talk." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, marrying the right woman, playing the perfect duke. Catherine deserved better than a husband who respected her but could never truly love her. You deserve better than a man who hides you away. I want to do this right. I want to choose you, openly, before God and everyone." Tears streamed down her face. "Your mother is not the one marrying you. I am. She'll make our lives hell." Then we'll face hell together, he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. What do you say, Eleanor Grey? Will you be my Duchess? She should have said no, should have been sensible, practical, realistic about the obstacles they'd face. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him, her first kiss, given freely, chosen deliberately. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. They told Lady Constance together, standing united in her gilded sitting room. The Dowager Duchess listened in glacial silence as Alexander made his announcement. Her face revealed nothing, but her hands gripping the arms of her chair betrayed her fury. Absolutely not. Mother, I'm not asking your permission. Then you're a fool. She rose, regal and terrifying. She's a fortune hunter who's been playing you from the beginning. That's enough. Alexander's voice could have cut glass. Is it? Lady Constance turned to Eleanor. Tell me, girl, did you plan this from the moment you arrived? Did you count on my son's grief, making him vulnerable? I never... Eleanor's voice shook. I never intended... She did nothing wrong, Alexander cut in. This was my choice, my decision, a decision you'll regret. The Dowager's eyes were chips of ice. The moment you tire of her, and you will tire of her, Alexander, men of your station always do, you'll be stuck with an unsuitable Duchess. Your children will have tainted blood. Your legacy. My legacy will be that I chose love over duty. He took Eleanor's hand. We're going to London tomorrow to obtain a special license. We'll be married within the week. If you do this, Lady Constance said, her voice deadly calm, you will regret it. Mark my words. They left her sitting there, surrounded by her rage and her certainty. Neither of them noticed the small, calculating smile that curved her lips once they were gone. They were married in a small church in London, with only Alexander's solicitor and best friend, James Hartley, as witnesses. Eleanor wore a simple cream silk gown Alexander had bought for her. No grand ceremony, no society wedding, just vows spoken with devastating sincerity. I, Alexander Charles Thorne, take thee, Eleanor, Grace Grey. His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his grandmother's ring, he told her, because she deserved something with history, something that said she belonged, her tears fell freely. She was a duchess. The wedding night was gentle, reverent. Alexander made love to her as if she were something precious, made of spun glass and starlight. Afterward, lying in his arms in their London townhouse, Eleanor thought she'd never been happier. No regrets, he murmured against her hair. None. My mother will come around eventually. Eleanor said nothing. She didn't share his optimism, but she didn't want to darken this moment with worry. I love you, Duchess Thorne. She smiled at the title, still strange and new. I love you, Alexander. If she had known that in 3 months this happiness would shatter into pieces too small to gather, would she have held him tighter, fought harder, refused to let him return to Ashford Manor? Perhaps, or perhaps some tragedies are inevitable, written in the stars, waiting only for the right moment to fall. They returned to Ashford Manor as Duke and Duchess, and for a brief, shining moment, Eleanor believed they might actually survive Lady Constance's disapproval. The staff treated her with respect due to her new position. Alexander was attentive, affectionate, proud to introduce her as his wife. They dined together, walked the grounds together, and at night, in the privacy of their chambers, he worshipped her with a tenderness that made her weep. But Lady Constance watched, and waited, and planned. The Dowager Duchess was a master strategist, and she knew that open warfare would only drive Alexander closer to his unsuitable bride. So she chose a different approach, slow, subtle poison. A comment here about Eleanor's common manners, a sigh there about her lack of connections. Nothing Alexander could directly challenge, but each small cut designed to make Eleanor doubt, to make her feel small, to remind her that she didn't belong. The Duchess of Waverley is hosting a ball next month, Lady Constance mentioned at breakfast one morning. Quite the event. Everyone will be there. We'll attend, of course, Alexander said. Of course. The Dowager's smile was thin. Though I do hope Eleanor has something appropriate to wear. The London modistes your father patronized might be able to help for a price. Naturally. The implication was clear. Eleanor's wardrobe was insufficient. Eleanor's taste was questionable. Eleanor herself was not quite good enough. Eleanor looks beautiful in everything, Alexander said firmly. But late that night, Eleanor stood before her wardrobe, suddenly seeing it through Lady Constance's eyes. Simple dresses, modest styles. Nothing grand enough for a duchess. What's wrong? Alexander found her there, wrapped in her dressing gown. I don't belong in your world. He turned her to face him. You belong with me. That's all that matters. Your mother is trying to drive a wedge between us. Don't let her. Eleanor wanted to believe it was that simple. But over the next weeks, Lady Constance's campaign intensified. Letters accidentally left where Eleanor would find them correspondence from Alexander's late wife, speaking of her love for him, of her hopes for their future. Portraits of Catherine displayed prominently, her beauty and aristocratic bearing a constant reminder of what a proper duchess should be. And then there were the servants. Small things at first. A lady's maid who was always just slightly too slow to help Eleanor dress, a housekeeper who forgot to inform her of planned events, a butler who addressed her with perfect courtesy but somehow made it feel like condescension. Alexander noticed none of it. He was gone, often his duties, as Duke, required trips to London, to his other estates, and every time he left, the isolation closed in a little tighter. Eleanor was walking in the garden, her only refuge when she felt it, a wave of dizziness so intense she had to grip a stone bench to keep from falling. Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper, appeared at her elbow. Your Grace? Are you unwell? I'm fine. Just a bit dizzy. The housekeeper's eyes sharpened with knowing. When was your last monthly course, Your Grace? Eleanor's mind went blank. When had it been? 6 weeks ago? 7? She'd been so caught up in the whirlwind of marriage, of learning to be a duchess, that she hadn't. Oh, God. I see, Mrs. Holloway said softly. Perhaps you should rest, Your Grace, and perhaps you might want to consult with a physician. Eleanor nodded numbly. She was pregnant. She carried the Duke of Ashford's heir. Joy flooded through her, bright and overwhelming. A child. Alexander's child. This would change everything. Lady Constance couldn't object to the mother of the next duke, could she? But when she tried to tell Alexander that evening at dinner, with his mother present, the words stuck in her throat. Something in Lady Constance's expression, sharp, calculating, made her hesitate. I'll tell him tonight, she decided, in private. But Alexander returned from the stables late, exhausted from a day of estate business. By the time he came to their chambers, Eleanor had fallen asleep, and in the morning he was gone to London before she woke. The pattern repeated itself for days. Each time she tried to tell him, something prevented it: his absence, his exhaustion, the presence of servants or his mother. The secret grew inside her, wonderful and terrifying, waiting for the right moment. She never found it. The letter arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. Eleanor was breaking her fast alone. Lady Constance claimed a headache, and Alexander was still in London when Mrs. Holloway brought in the post. For you, Your Grace. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the London postmark made her heart lift. Perhaps Alexander had written. She broke the seal and read, Your Grace, it is my unfortunate duty to inform you that certain evidence has come to my attention regarding your conduct prior to your marriage to the Duke of Ashford. While I am loath to cause you distress, my duty to His Grace compels me to report that you were observed in compromising situations with multiple gentlemen during your time in London, including Mr. Thomas Reed of... The letter went on, detailing supposed affairs, clandestine meetings, behavior unbefitting a duchess. All of it lies, all of it impossible. She'd never been to London before her wedding, had never even heard of most of the men named, but it was signed by someone claiming to be Alexander's solicitor, Mr. Edmund Harris. Eleanor's hands shook. This was madness. Alexander would never believe it, would he? A second letter lay beneath the first, this one in Alexander's own hand. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. Eleanor, I write this from London, where certain information has reached me that I can no longer ignore. Mr. Harris has provided evidence of behavior I find impossible to reconcile with the woman I believed you to be. I am not a man who acts rashly, but neither can I ignore such serious accusations. I require time to consider the situation and to investigate the claims made against you. Until such time as these matters are resolved, I think it best that you remain at Ashford Manor. I will return when I have determined the truth. Haventing 22. No, my love. No, my darling wife. Just a cold, formal dismissal. Eleanor read it 3 times. each word cutting deeper than the last. He believed it. Without even asking her, without giving her a chance to defend herself, he believed the lies. She looked up to find Lady Constance standing in the doorway, a small smile playing at her lips. "Trouble, my dear." And in that moment, Eleanor understood. The letters, the accusations, even the solicitor's name, all of it orchestrated by the Dowager Duchess. She'd waited until Alexander was away, until Eleanor was isolated, and then she'd struck. "This is your doing," Eleanor whispered. "I don't know what you mean." Lady Constance moved into the room, graceful as a serpent. "Though I did warn you, didn't I? That my son would regret this marriage. He loves me. He thinks he does. But men are fickle creatures, easily swayed by passion and just as easily turned by doubt." She paused at Eleanor's chair, looking down with cold satisfaction. "You were a pleasant diversion, my dear, but you were never meant to be Duchess of Ashford. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." "I won't leave." Eleanor stood, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. "I'm his wife, legally, before God." "Are you?" Lady Constance's smile sharpened. "Or are you simply a woman he bedded and called wife for a few weeks? Marriages can be annulled, my dear, particularly when the bride is discovered to be less than chaste. I've done nothing wrong, haven't you?" The Dowager pulled another letter from her pocket. "This is from Alexander, instructing me to assist you in leaving Ashford Manor quietly. He's prepared to provide you with a generous settlement, £500 annually, in exchange for your discretion and your absence." Eleanor felt the world tilt. "You're lying. Read it yourself." Lady Constance laid the letter on the table. With shaking hands, Eleanor unfolded it. The handwriting was Alexander's, or a masterful forgery. It instructed his mother to resolve the situation with Miss Grey and to ensure her comfortable removal from Ashford Manor and my life. "Miss Grey, not my wife, not the Duchess." "He doesn't want you," Lady Constance said softly. "He never really did. You were simply there, convenient. A momentary weakness he now regrets. I need to speak with him. He doesn't wish to see you." The Dowager's voice was almost kind now, which made it worse. "Surely you understand. A man of his position, deceived so thoroughly, he's humiliated, angry. The last thing he wants is to face you." Eleanor gripped the table, her vision swimming. This couldn't be happening. Not when she carried his child, not when they'd been so happy just weeks ago. "I'm pregnant," she said, desperate. "I'm carrying his heir." For just a moment, something flickered in Lady Constance's eyes. Fear? No. Calculation? "Are you?" she asked softly. "Or is it some other man's bastard you're trying to pass off as a thorn?" The cruelty of it stole Eleanor's breath. "3 months ago, you were a paid companion," Lady Constance continued. "Who's to say what you did, whom you saw, before you trapped my son into marriage, without Alexander here to verify the timing?" She shrugged. "The scandal alone would destroy what remains of your reputation, and his." Eleanor understood then. Even the truth, the beautiful, precious truth of the child growing inside her, would be twisted into another weapon. "What do you want?" she asked, defeated. "I want you gone. Tonight. There's a carriage being prepared. You'll take the settlement Alexander has provided and disappear. You'll never contact him, never use the Thorn name, never make any claim on his estate or his child, should there actually be one. And if I refuse?" Lady Constance's smile was terrible. "Then I'll have Mr. Harris bring charges of fraud against you. You forged documents, lied about your background, trapped a duke into marriage. You'll be tried, convicted, and transported. Is that what you want for your supposed child? To be born in a penal colony?" Eleanor's hands went to her stomach, protective and terrified. "I thought not." The Dowager pulled a document from her reticule. "Sign this. It's a simple agreement that you'll accept the settlement and relinquish all claims to the title, the estate, and any future contact with the Duke of Ashford. He'll come looking for me. He won't. He's already convinced you're not the woman he thought you were. By the time he returns, you'll be gone, and I'll ensure he believes you left by choice, that you took the money and ran." Eleanor wanted to fight, wanted to refuse, to wait for Alexander, to make him hear the truth. But the document Lady Constance held out wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the child, innocent, defenseless, dependent on her to keep it safe. If Lady Constance made good on her threat to bring charges, Eleanor would lose everything. The child would be born in prison or worse, and Alexander, believing the lies, wouldn't stop it. With tears streaming down her face, Eleanor signed the paper. The carriage left Ashford Manor at midnight, in the middle of a storm that felt like the sky itself was weeping. Eleanor sat in the cold, dark interior, her small bag beside her, the settlement papers folded in her pocket. £500, the price of a duke's unwanted wife. She pressed her hand to her stomach, where their baby grew in secret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Your father, he didn't know. He'll never know." The coachman had instructions to take her to the nearest town with a coaching inn. From there, she was on her own. Lady Constance had been very clear. Any attempt to return, any attempt to contact Alexander, would void the settlement and result in immediate prosecution. Eleanor had nowhere to go. Her father's estate was long sold. She had no family, no friends with the resources to help a disgraced duchess in exile. She was alone, completely, devastatingly alone. Eleanor sat in a shabby room above a coaching inn, counting the money Lady Constance had given her. It was already running low: lodging, food. She'd had to buy warmer clothes when the weather turned. At this rate, it would last 6 months at most, not nearly long enough to have a baby and recover. She needed work. But who would hire a woman clearly pregnant and without references? She couldn't use the Thorn name that was forbidden by the agreement. She couldn't claim her title. No one would believe her anyway, looking as she did now. The morning sickness had gotten worse. She could barely keep down dry toast and weak tea. The doctor she'd consulted, spending precious coins, confirmed she was about 10 weeks along. Healthy so far, but needed better food, better lodging, less stress. She laughed bitterly at that. Less stress. At night she lay awake, thinking of Alexander. Did he miss her? Or had he been relieved when his mother told him she was gone? Did he think of her at all? Or had she already been filed away in his memory as a mistake, a momentary madness? She wrote him letters she could never send. "My dearest Alexander, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you'd believe me if you did. But I need you to know I never betrayed you. Every moment we shared was real. Every word I spoke was true. I loved you. I love you still. And I'm carrying your child. Our son or daughter will be born in 5 months, and you'll never know them. They'll never know you. All because I was too weak to fight for us, and you were too quick to believe the worst. I don't blame you for doubting. Your mother is formidable, and the evidence must have been convincing. But I wish, God, how I wish you had asked me. Give me one chance to defend myself, one moment to look in your eyes and show you the truth. I suppose it doesn't matter now. I love you, Alexander. I'll love you until the day I die, and I'll tell our child about their father, about his kindness, his strength, his rare smiles. I'll tell them about the man who promised to choose love over duty, who made me believe in fairy tales for one brief, shining moment. Even if you never believe in us again. Yours always, Eleanor." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it away with the others. 12 letters, each one a whisper into the void. She never sent them. Lady Constance had made sure of that. 300 miles away, Alexander Thorn stood in his library, reading the same words for the 100th time. Mr. Harris's report, the evidence of Eleanor's supposed betrayals, the witnesses who claimed to have seen her in compromising positions. It should have been damning. It was certainly thorough. So why did something about it feel wrong? Still brooding? His mother entered without knocking. "Really, Alexander, you must move past this. The girl was unsuitable from the start. Her name was Eleanor." "Was Eleanor," Lady Constance corrected smoothly. "And now she's gone. You should be grateful I handled the situation discreetly. Can you imagine the scandal if this had become public? Where did she go? I'm sure I don't know. Somewhere far from here, I hope. She took the settlement you generously provided and left in the night. Like a thief." Alexander's jaw tightened. That part didn't fit either. Eleanor had never cared about money. Even when he'd bought her gowns, jewelry, she'd protested, uncomfortable with the expense. Would she really have taken £500 and vanished without a word? "I want to speak with Mr. Harris," he said suddenly. His mother stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Whatever for?" "I want to see this evidence firsthand. Question the witnesses myself." "Alexander, that's not necessary. I'll decide what's necessary." He turned to face her fully. "Send it to him. Tomorrow." Something flickered in Lady Constance's eyes, something that looked almost like panic. "Of course, darling. Though I must warn you, revisiting this will only cause you more pain." He said nothing. But after she left, he walked to Eleanor's chambers, the rooms she'd occupied for only 8 weeks as his wife. They'd been stripped bare on his mother's orders, every trace of her removed. All except one thing. In the back of a drawer, he found a handkerchief she'd embroidered herself. Clumsy stitches, uneven letters, a small E in the corner. She'd been embarrassed when he discovered it, saying she'd never been good at needlework, not like a proper lady should be. He'd kissed her and told her he didn't want a proper lady. He wanted her. Standing alone in the empty room, Alexander pressed the handkerchief to his face and breathed in her fading scent. "Where are you, Eleanor?" he whispered. "What have I done?" Alexander Thorne sat across from Edmund Harris in his London solicitor's office, and with each question he asked, each inconsistency he uncovered, the terrible truth solidified. "The witness statements," Alexander said, his voice deadly calm. "The men who claim to have seen Eleanor in compromising positions. I want their names and addresses." Mr. Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Your Grace, I don't think." "Their names. Now." The solicitor produced a list. Alexander spent the next week tracking down each witness personally. The first man, supposedly a gentleman who'd seen Eleanor at a London theatre, turned out to be a hired actor, paid £50 to sign a statement he'd never actually written. The second had never met Eleanor at all. He'd signed a document he thought was a property lease, not realizing he was swearing to events that never happened. The third had been given a generous donation by an anonymous benefactor shortly before providing his statement. By the time Alexander reached the fourth witness, he didn't need to ask any questions. The man took one look at the Duke's face and confessed everything. "I was told to lie, Your Grace. I swear I never met the lady. A woman came to me, an older lady, very fine, and she said she needed witnesses for a delicate matter. She paid me £100, I thought. I didn't think it would hurt anyone." "Describe this woman." The man's description was precise. Tall, elegant, silver hair, imperious bearing. Lady Constance Thorne, his mother. Alexander left the man's lodgings and walked through London like a ghost. Everything he'd believed about Eleanor's betrayal, all of it engineered by his own mother. The evidence, the witnesses, even the letter he'd received, supposedly from Mr. Harris, but actually written by someone else, using the man's name. He returned to Ashford Manor at dawn, his rage a cold, controlled thing. He found Lady Constance at breakfast, serene as ever. "Good morning, darling. You're back early. Where is she?" His mother's cup paused halfway to her lips. "I beg your pardon. Eleanor, my wife. Where is she?" Silence. "You orchestrated everything," Alexander continued, his voice soft with fury. "The accusations, the witnesses, even the letter supposedly from me, instructing you to send her away. You forged it, didn't you?" "I did what was necessary." "You destroyed my marriage!" The roar echoed through the dining room. Servants froze in the corridors. "You lied. You manipulated. You drove away the only woman I've ever truly loved because she wasn't good enough for your standards. She was a fortune hunter. She was a baron's daughter who wanted nothing from me but love." Alexander slammed his hand on the table. "She refused every gift I tried to give her. She married me in a simple church, with no fanfare, no demands. The only thing she ever asked for was to be allowed to love me." Lady Constance's face remained stony. "You were besotted. You couldn't see clearly." "I saw perfectly clearly. You're the one who couldn't see." He leaned forward. "Where did you send her?" "I don't know." "You're lying." "I'm not." For the first time, uncertainty crept into his mother's voice. "I gave her money and told her to leave. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't care." "How much money?" £500. Alexander's stomach dropped. £500. Enough to live modestly for a year, perhaps. But it had been 4 months. If Eleanor had no family, no resources beyond that settlement. "When exactly did she leave?" "The night you were in London. Late October." "Late October." Alexander's mind raced, calculating. "She's been gone for 4 months." "Yes, 4 months. Alone. Believing he'd rejected her. Believing he thought her a liar and a cheat. God, what had he done? "I'm going to find her," he said, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "And when I do, if she's suffered because of what you've done." "What will you do?" Lady Constance stood, finally showing anger. She was unsuitable. She would have dragged this family into scandal and shame. I saved you from a terrible mistake. You took everything from me. Alexander's control shattered. My wife, my chance at happiness. He stopped. A horrible thought had just occurred to him. Did she say anything? He asked, his voice suddenly quiet. Before she left, did Eleanor say anything at all? Lady Constance's eyes shifted away. Just for a second, but it was enough. What did she tell you? Nothing of consequence. What did she tell you? She claimed. His mother's voice was tight. She claimed to be with a child. Obviously a lie, a desperate attempt to stay. Alexander couldn't breathe. The room spun. His vision narrowed to a single point. With child, he whispered. Eleanor was pregnant. She was lying. She doesn't lie. He was moving now, toward the door, his mind racing. She's never lied. Not once. Not even when the truth hurt her. Where are you going? To find my wife. He turned at the door. And my child. If they're still alive. If I hadn't killed them both through my stupidity. Alexander, don't. His voice was pure ice. Don't speak to me. Don't write to me. As of this moment, you are no longer welcome in any of my homes. Your allowance will be reduced to the legal minimum required for a dowager duchess. You will live quietly in the dower house, and you will never interfere in my life again. I'm your mother. You're a stranger who destroyed my family. He left her there, pale and shaking, and began the search that would consume the next 4 months of his life. Finding a woman who didn't want to be found was harder than Alexander had imagined. Eleanor had left no trail, no coaching in records, no letters, no trace of where she'd gone or how she'd traveled. It was as if she'd vanished into smoke. He hired investigators. He questioned every servant at Ashford Manor. He traveled to every town within 100 miles, showing Eleanor's portrait, asking if anyone had seen her. Nothing. At night, he lay awake, tormented by visions of what might be happening to her. She'd been pregnant when she left 4 months ago now, which meant she could be due any day. Was she alone? Was she safe? Did she have a doctor, a midwife, anyone to help her? The thought of Eleanor giving birth alone, in some shabby room, believing he'd abandoned her, was a knife that twisted deeper with every passing day. Your Grace, his investigator said one morning, 4 months into the search, I may have found something. Alexander's heart stopped. Where? A small village in Suffolk. A woman matching the Duchess's description took lodgings there about 3 months ago. She's been using the name Miss Grey. And Your Grace. The investigator hesitated. The landlady says she's heavily pregnant, due any day now. Alexander was on his horse before the man finished speaking. The lodging house was worse than he'd imagined. A sagging building on the edge of a village too small to have a proper name, with broken windows and a door that hung crooked on its hinges. His Eleanor, his Duchess, was living here. He took the stairs 3 at a time, following the landlady's directions to the room at the back of the 2nd floor. The door was ajar. Inside, he heard voices. Push, miss. You have to push. A midwife. Eleanor was in labor. Alexander shoved the door open. The scene before him stopped his heart. Eleanor lay on a narrow bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face contorted with pain. A midwife crouched between her knees, and a young girl barely more than a child herself held Eleanor's hand. Eleanor's eyes opened at the sound of the door. When she saw him, the color drained from her face. No, she gasped. No, you can't. You have to leave. He was across the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed. Eleanor. My God. Eleanor. The agreement, she sobbed. I signed. I can't see you. She'll prosecute. There is no agreement. He took her other hand, gripping it tightly. It was all lies. All of it. I know everything, Eleanor. I know what my mother did. I know you're innocent. I know. His voice broke. I know I failed you. Your Grace. You need to leave, the midwife said firmly. This is no place for... I'm not leaving. Alexander's voice was steel. This is my wife. This is my child. I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor's next contraction hit, and she screamed. Alexander held her hand, letting her squeeze until his bones ached, his own tears streaming freely. I'm here, he whispered. I'm here, my love. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Alexander. Her voice was weak. "If I die." "You're not going to die." "If I do," she gasped for breath. "Promise me. Promise you'll love our child, even though I'm not the mother you wanted for your heir." "Stop." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You're the only mother I want, the only woman I want. I love you, Eleanor. I never stopped. I never will," she sobbed, the sound breaking his heart all over again. "One more push, miss," the midwife encouraged. "Just one more." Eleanor pushed with the last of her strength, and the cry that filled the room was the most beautiful sound Alexander had ever heard. "It's a boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy, strong boy. A son." He had a son. The midwife cleaned the baby quickly and placed him in Eleanor's arms. She looked down at the tiny, red, squalling thing and smiled through her tears. "He has your eyes," she whispered to Alexander. Alexander looked at his son, his heir, and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. This child, born in poverty, in a shabby room that should have been a grand estate, was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "What will we call him?" Eleanor asked. "Thomas." Alexander's voice was rough. "After your father. If that's all right with you." Eleanor's tears fell onto the baby's face. "Thomas Alexander Greythorne," she murmured. "It's perfect." For a long moment, they simply sat there, husband, wife, and child, and let the weight of 4 months of separation, of lies and pain and desperate searching, finally lift. "Eleanor," Alexander said at last, "can you ever forgive me?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much suffering, and yet somehow still held love. "Can you forgive me for not fighting harder, for believing in your mother instead of trusting in us?" "There's nothing to forgive." He cupped her face gently. "You did what you thought you had to do to protect our child. You survived. You kept him safe. That's all that matters. I thought you hated me." "Never." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Not for one single second. Even when I thought you'd betrayed me, even when I believed the lies some part of me always knew, always loved you." The baby Thomas made a small noise. They both looked down at him, this perfect, impossible miracle. "We should leave," the midwife said gently. "Give the family some privacy." When they were alone, Alexander carefully lifted Eleanor, still holding their son, and carried them both to the narrow bed. He lay down beside them, wrapping his arms around his entire world. "I'm taking you home," he murmured. "Both of you. To Ashford Manor." Eleanor stiffened. "Your mother is no longer at Ashford Manor, and if she ever comes near you or Thomas again, I'll have her arrested for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." "Alexander, I mean it, Eleanor. I let her destroy us once. I won't allow it again." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are my wife. Thomas is my son and heir. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for the months I stole from you. You didn't steal them. Your mother. I should have known." His voice was fierce with self-recrimination. "I should have trusted you. I should have questioned the evidence, investigated before I believed. Instead, I let 4 months pass while you suffered alone. While you gave birth to my child, thinking I didn't want you." Eleanor touched his face. "I never thought you didn't want me. I thought you didn't know the truth, that your mother had convinced you I was unworthy. You're the worthiest woman I've ever known." Thomas squirmed between them, demanding attention. Eleanor laughed, the first real laugh Alexander had heard from her, and it was like music. "He's hungry," she said. "Then feed him." Alexander kissed her temple. "I'll stay right here." He watched as Eleanor nursed their son, this intimate, sacred moment he'd nearly missed forever, and he made a silent vow. Never again would he let duty or pride or his mother's machinations come between him and this family. They had lost too much time already. He wouldn't waste another second. The christening of Thomas Alexander Greythorne, future Duke of Ashford, was held on a brilliant spring morning in the chapel at Ashford Manor. Eleanor stood at the front in a gown of pale blue silk, proper, expensive, befitting a duchess, but Alexander loved her most in the simple nightgown she wore when nursing their son at dawn. The chapel was full. Every noble family in the county had been invited, and most had come, some out of curiosity, some out of genuine goodwill, all of them aware that they were witnessing something unusual, a duke, openly, proudly, celebrating the son of a wife society had once deemed unsuitable. "I christen thee, Thomas Alexander Greythorne," the vicar intoned, pouring water over the baby's head. Thomas, 6 months old now, with his father's grey eyes and his mother's delicate features, gurgled happily through the ceremony. He was a healthy, thriving child who smiled easily and rarely cried, nothing like the premature, desperate birth that had marked his entry into the world. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the grand hall of Ashford Manor. Eleanor stood beside Alexander, accepting congratulations, and for the first time since becoming Duchess, she felt she truly belonged. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton, one of the most formidable matrons in society, approached with a warm smile. "What a beautiful child. You and the Duke must be so proud." "We are," Eleanor said simply. "And such a romantic story." Lady Pemberton lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I confess, I had my doubts when I first heard the Duke had married his mother's companion, but seeing you together—" She glanced at Alexander, who was showing Thomas to a group of admiring gentlemen. "It's clear this is a love match. How rare, how wonderful." Eleanor smiled. "Yes, it is." The reception lasted hours. By the time the last guest departed, Eleanor was exhausted. She found Alexander in the nursery, rocking a sleepy Thomas. "Everyone's gone," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Good," he smiled at her. "I have you to myself again." She crossed to them, looking down at their son. "He did well today. Barely cried during the christening. He's Thorn. We're stoic." Alexander's expression softened. "Though I wasn't particularly stoic when they took him from my arms earlier. I've become disgustingly sentimental." "I noticed." Eleanor touched his face. "I love this version of you, the one who cries over his son and writes terrible poetry about my eyes. That poetry is not terrible. It rhymes Eleanor with adore her, which is accurate." She kissed him, cutting off his protest. Thomas made a sleepy sound of contentment between them. "Come to bed," Eleanor murmured. "All of us." They put Thomas in his cradle right beside their bed, as it had been since they'd returned to Ashford Manor, and lay down together. Alexander pulled Eleanor against him, one hand resting on her hip, the other reaching out to rock the cradle gently. "I got a letter from my mother today," he said quietly. Eleanor stiffened. "What did it say?" "She wants to see Thomas, to apologize." "Do you want that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me does. She's my mother. I want to believe people can change and can make amends." He pulled Eleanor closer. "But a larger part of me remembers what she did to you, to us, and I think some wounds are too deep for apologies. If you want to see her—" "I don't." His voice was firm. "Not now. Maybe not ever. She made her choice when she drove you away. She chose her vision of what my life should be over my actual happiness. I won't forgive that easily." Eleanor turned in his arms, looking up at him in the moonlight. "You're a good man, Alexander Thorn. I'm a man who let the woman he loved suffer for 4 months, who missed his son's birth, who nearly lost everything that mattered. You're a man who searched for 4 months until he found me, who held my hand while I gave birth in a shabby room, who brought us home and gave us the life we should have had from the beginning." She kissed him softly. "You made mistakes. So did I. But we found our way back to each other. That's what matters." In the cradle, Thomas stirred. Eleanor rose to check on him, and Alexander watched her, this woman, who'd been hired as his mother's companion and become his entire world. She was right. They'd found their way back, and he would spend the rest of his life ensuring they never lost each other again. 2 years after the christening, Ashford Manor had become something it had never been in Alexander's lifetime: a home. Thomas, now 2.5, ran through the halls with the confidence of a child who knew he was loved. His little sister, Catherine, named for Alexander's first wife, in a gesture of peace with the past, followed him on unsteady legs, giggling. Eleanor stood in the garden, watching them play, her hand resting unconsciously on her stomach, 3 months along with their 3rd child. Alexander had cried when she told him, overcome with joy and gratitude for the family he'd almost lost. He found her there, as he always did in the afternoons. His arms came around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy," he murmured. "Impossibly so." "Good." He turned her in his arms. "I got a letter from James Hartley today. He's getting married." "That's wonderful. He wants us to attend the wedding. In London." Eleanor hesitated. London, where it had all fallen apart, where the lies had begun. "We'll go," she decided. It's time to make new memories there. Good ones. Alexander kissed her forehead. I love you, Eleanor Thorne. Every day, I love you more. And I love you, she smiled up at him, even when you write terrible poetry. Especially when I write terrible poetry. Thomas ran up to them, demanding his father's attention. Catherine followed, arms outstretched. Alexander scooped them both up, laughing, and Eleanor watched her duke, this man who'd been so cold and duty-bound when she first met him, transformed into a devoted father and husband. They'd been through hell to get here. They'd lost months to lies and misunderstanding. They'd nearly lost each other forever. But standing in the garden of Ashford Manor, surrounded by the laughter of their children and the warmth of their love, Eleanor knew it had been worth it. Every tear, every lonely night, every moment of doubt, because they'd found their way back to each other, and this time, nothing would ever tear them apart again.